After months of wrangling, terms have been finalised for holding a referendum on Scottish independence led by First Minister Alex Salmond. But can Scotland afford to go solo? Joining me to discuss is Robert Wright, Professor of Economics for the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. So Robert, former oil economist Salmond says Scotland would be prosperous, entitled to the lion's share of North Sea oil revenues, and that it should be able to borrow at rates no worse than London, should people vote yes. He in fact claims that an independent Scotland would be the sixth richest country in the world, but in your opinion, is this a realistic statement to make?
I mean, it all boils down to who gets control and who gets the revenues from the oil. Now, a lot of this assumes that the lion's share of the oil revenue will flow to Scotland and not to the government in London, but it's not clearly the case that this will happen because it's much more complicated than that. But it's with a population of 5.3 million. If Scotland does get the majority of the revenue from the North Sea oil, they will be a very, very wealthy country indeed.
As a result of the Cameron-Salmond compromises announced on Monday, the age of those eligible to vote yes or no has been reduced. Do you agree with the fact that people who are currently 14 and 15 will have a say in what politicians on all sides agree is the most important decision in Scotland for 300 years?
This is quite an important issue, probably more important than some people have made out. If we look at the experience of the province of Quebec, one of the reasons they felt that they lost the referendum, and a very close referendum, 51% versus 49%, for Quebec leading Canada, was because they didn't ask the young people. The minimum age of the voting was 18. And the political scientists argued that if the younger people were included in the vote, it would have been a clear yes. So I think that it's the case that the younger people in Scotland are going to be more pro-independence, and the more of these people that you can include in the vote, the higher the probability, I think, that it will be a majority yes.
In your opinion, Robert, just how will the average person on the street be affected by Scottish independence? What are the benefits and risks, for example?
Well, I mean, the thing is that we've got to think about what an independent Scotland means. I mean, independent Scotland, it will only be independent in the context of the European Union. So, I mean, it's not like it'll be an independent country and completely be able to do what it wants. I mean, there'll be rules and regulations it has to follow. But I mean, I think that, potentially the average Scottish person could be much better off. But it all boils down to the single question of who gets the majority of the money from the North Sea oil, and how is that spent? I mean, we see countries that have used their oil money wisely, like Norway, and we've seen lots of other countries in the Middle East, for example, who have wasted, or basically are wasting their oil revenue. So it depends on how we're governed, how responsible they are, and how much we get from this resource that the majority of Scottish people think they own, but international law may not actually reach a similar conclusion. And, we're in a situation in Scotland where, we would be the first country that breaks off from another country and, in a sense, applies for membership in the EU. We've had other countries that have broken up, then become part of the EU, like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, but we will be the first. And an interesting repercussion of this is it will be, what kind of message will it send to the other independents or the other regions of the EU who are thinking of going towards independence, like Catalan, for example, the Basque regions, and many other regions throughout the European Union.
One of the arguments that Scotland can thrive from independence is due to the fact it's rich in natural resources. How real, though, is the threat of Scotland falling fallow to a resource curse? Do you think the renewable energy potential is enough to keep Scotland financially afloat?
Well, any way you can provide cheaper energy, whether it be wind power, tidal power, whatever, of course, this is going to give you an advantage in terms of manufacturing and trade. You lower the price of a raw material, then, this has a clear benefit. But again, I mean, this is something that Scotland is banking its future on in a way, but it's banking its future on it under the assumption that the majority of the revenue from the North Sea oil goes to London, and they get a chunk of that back through a transfer, through the Barnett formula. So, again, I mean, the status quo, of course, is a situation where, this renewable energy could be extremely important to Scotland's future, but it will be, I think, only important, not extremely important, of course, if the revenue from the majority of the revenue from North Sea oil flows to Scottish Parliament.
Another topic of controversy is regarding defence and more particularly Trident. What is your take on this matter?
It's a tricky one because in the current arrangement, there is a military in the United Kingdom, that is the United Kingdom-wide military, with lots of Scottish soldiers and officers in it. And one of the outcomes of this process is that Trident is stationed here in Scotland, and that's the deal. And as long as the UK stays together like it is in the current configuration, I think that Scotland more or less is obligated to keep Trident here. If it becomes independent, then it probably will not have an army, or a very small one, and I think Trident would be something that would have to be shifted to the other countries of the United Kingdom that remain in the Union.
Given the lack of clarity about oil, do you believe that people are informed enough to be able to make this decision? Are they been given all the facts?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been given a lot of misinformation, a lot of accurate information, etc. But I mean, another way of thinking about this, and I think is one that, again, it's not talked about very much. Is much of the debate is couched in terms of the economics benefit of becoming independent because you get this North Sea oil. But I mean, that's a big if. I mean, there's another issue, and it's got really nothing to do with economics. It's about who you want to be governed by. And I think the typical Scottish person does not want to be governed by a bunch of distant politicians in London. And indeed, with the establishment of the Scottish Parliament, I think it's been quite successful, is the fact that, their politicians are closer to home. And I don't think anybody would argue that the situation would be better having politicians that are farther away and farther removed from what's going on here. And I think one of the, the outcomes, or one of the things that is driving whether you're going to vote yes or no is basically who you want to be governed by. And, you can't put a price tag on that, and it's got nothing to do with oil, et cetera. It's just, what you want, who you want your rulers to be, or your masters to be, if you want to think of it that way.
So, taking everything into consideration that you have just discussed, at present, are you for or against an independent Scotland?
I think the independence discussion and the independence debate and the referendum and all this is positive, because we're finding more and more out about what the people of Scotland want, and the politicians are going to have to react to this. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's 2 years away, this referendum, and, there'll be a lot of politicking between now and then on both sides, and you clearly see that, there's not too many people in between, so it's either yes or no. And as I think it's going to be close, and I think it can go in terms of the percentages either way.
Robert, thank you very much for your time and insights today on speaking about this subject, which is also very close to my heart. For more exclusive interviews and fundamental analysis, click back to DukascopyTV. But for now, viewers, goodbye.